Okay. Welcome to Daily Life. I'm Vince Mercandetti with Jake Schwartz here. And Jake, we are going to talk about anxiety. That's our topic for the night, to be posted, trying to spread some awareness here as part of our mental health month. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. It's Thursday, so that means one more day in the work week, which is nice. I'm excited to get back to the weekend. So doing pretty
Yeah,
good. Interested
we're
to see how
almost
this whole
there. It's
yeah,
I'm
almost there.
I'm glad you
Almost
pointed
there.
out it's Thursday. This is pre-recorded. We still don't have a president as of this moment.
That's
Uh,
true. I forget.
but yeah, maybe by the time this plays, we will. We'll see.
Who
But
knows?
yeah, thank you for joining. Like I said, topics anxiety. I figure the best way to start with this is tell us what anxiety means to you and also what your actual diagnosis is.
Yeah, for sure. So um I do think, nowadays we're in a world where there's a lot of self-diagnosis taking place. A lot of people kind of, say, oh, this is happening. I have symptoms from what I see or hear. So I have this thing, right? And so it's not really well known that there are really actually two forms of anxiety, at least by how it's diagnosed. And so there's anxiety or anxiety attacks, and then there's the actual what's in the DSM-5 panic disorder. And panic disorder has panic attacks, right? So um, anxiety is basically known stresses, known kind of disturbing feelings and thoughts and things that you deal with that can lead to symptoms that can't be physical, but mostly kind of mental or emotional of worry, fear, and distress. Where panic attacks or in panic disorder is more abrupt sensations followed by very physical reactions. So your body physically reacts to the mental anguish, and it can be brought on by stressors, but it's really brought on more abruptly. I actually was diagnosed. Was this 2016? I believe it was. I started. This is pretty weird. I started peeing like 20 times a night, and I was like, oh man, I got a UTI or an STD. Something is not right. Like, what is going on here?
To
you know?
clarify, you are not like 65 years old.
No.
All right.
I was only what is it, 2024 years, 4 or 5 years ago. Um, Now I had only always had a weak stomach, and I'll get to why that's relevant in a second. But I have normal stress. I get stressed out. I'd have like temper issues, but nothing crazy. I actually had friends in my first marriage. They had actual anxiety. And so I've been a supporter in that vein. But anyway, so 4 years ago, I started peeing like 20 times a night. I was like, what the hell is going on? So I finally booked a doctor's appointment. I went to the doctor. And they tested me, everything checked out. My blood was fine. And he believed that I had anxiety. So then set up to go speak to a therapist. And then at that point is where I got diagnosed with panic disorder, with
The
anxiety.
therapist
So
diagnosed
both.
you.
Yeah. Well, the doctor and then the psychiatrist. So it was both. So eventually I started off on Zoloft at the time. And then I got off of it, came back and got Xanax, and now I've been on Xanax for a couple of years now. But anyway, so panic disorder, but with anxiety. So they're both kind of, it's very confusing, but they're both kind of overlappy because they share a lot of symptoms. But the real main difference that's important is that anxiety that manifests itself. Oh, Vince, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're all right.
Oh, okay. Um, it manifests itself in anxiety attacks, where panic disorder and panic attacks are more like abrupt, kind of hits you out of nowhere. You're not expecting it because you're not thinking about anything. It's hard to trace where it comes from. That's like the worst in the world, is when you go into this kind of mode of, you have a fear that you're going to die, you have a fear of the world crashing on you, kind of get this pit in your stomach, and it starts to kind of manifest into tunnel vision meets like I'm suffocating, but I'm not actually choking on anything or water. And it's you're stuck in it, and it just happens out of nowhere. Where an anxiety attack is like, I'm stressed about work, I'm stressed about this, and then you're kind of getting those feelings, it's kind of arising, and then the symptoms can become more severe, but it's not actually classified as a mental disorder in the DSM-5. So Not saying it's not, it's very difficult. Either is brutal to deal with, but just kind of psychologically speaking, it's a difference.
There's a difference there, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's an important differentiator. I think a lot of people maybe don't realize, myself included. So anxiety is basically that usually stems from some sort of stress-induced problem, and then it's a matter of kind of having to deal with that. Sometimes people have attacks over it, but panic attacks, there is no trigger, or you can't trace a trigger, or it can be random.
They're mostly abrupt, like out of nowhere, and I'll give you an example soon about that. But ironically, you can have an anxiety attack and a panic attack at the same time. It's very possible. Anxiety attacks usually are mostly emotional. So they're like, you feel apprehensive, you're distressed, you have restlessness, maybe you start to get some heart palpitations, some chest pain, shortage of breath, stuff like that. Panic attacks are more on the like fear side. You have like a fear of something happening, a phobia, a fear of dying, a fear of losing your job, a fear of whatever. And that starts to create kind of like a sense of detachment, basically. It's like you feel like you're detaching from the world. And so like that's where a panic attack can happen. So both can happen at the same time. And both have very common symptoms of, sweating, shortage of breath, your throat tightens up, stuff like that. But the physical, like actual reactions to having like nausea or upset stomach and like throwing up and having it become physical, that's where it's mostly panic attack world, and can be a severe anxiety attack. And anxiety is like mild, severe. It can have all sorts of symptoms. People
like
feel
spectrum.
Yeah, it's like a spectrum. Our panic attacks are really severe. They're like, it comes out of nowhere. And when you're in it, like usually I'm able to, like, sometimes I can trace why it's happening. And that's probably an anxiety attack. I'm like, all right, work's been really stressed. I'm thinking about tomorrow. I have to have a difficult conversation with someone. I'm all night long. I'm thinking about it. I wake up in the morning and I have an anxiety attack. That's like correlated, and I can feel it building.
What symptoms do you have when you have an anxiety attack, just to differentiate?
Yeah. So, again, it's like that, you're starting to like get a lot of worry. So you're in your mind, you start worrying about things. You kind of get restless. You can't sleep. You're feeling like distress. Some sweating may start, maybe a little bit of shaking, stuff like that. It's hard to describe because there's like an internal feeling that is not very physically obvious, which is like, it's almost like an internal numbness. Like you're just numb. And you're like, that you're stressed, that you're upset, but you're just like kind of internally numb. And so those kind of things happen when you're getting an anxiety attack. So that's like what I experience commonly when I have a lot of stress taking place in my life. And there's a lot of stress, anxiety attacks typically happen. When those stresses lead to fears, and I start to actually fear things or like have great concern, that's where randomly or abruptly a very severe panic attack can happen. And that's where like my reaction to panic attacks, and everyone's can be different. Sometimes people have extreme back pain. I don't go through that. Some people can have extreme back pain where they like feel like, oh my God, my back went out. What's going on? That can actually be a panic attack. Mine are dry heaving and throwing up. So like I'll start to feel it, and I know like, oh my God, and I'm booking it to the bathroom, and you start to shake, you're shaking, and you're going to throw up, and nothing comes out though. So you like dry heave or acid vomit, not to get gross, but that kind of comes out, and it's over and over again. And it's just like, it just eventually has to go away. It's the worst thing in the world because, and it's hard to be someone who supports someone in that. Like I give my wife a lot of credit because it's not, you feel helpless as someone supporting that person.
Yeah.
And depending, like if someone has anxiety, not an anxiety attack, but just anxiety, right? And just feeling, nervous, anxious, stressed, you could probably be calmed down a little bit easier. Someone could sit with you, rub your back, tell you it's going to be okay, and you can calm down. At panic attack level, it's very hard because, you know, when you're in that zone, you really don't want to see or talk to anyone. Like, I don't want anything to do with anybody. I just want to like get through it and just I know in my head, I just to tell myself it's gonna eventually be over. It's gonna be over. You're not gonna die. You feel like you're gonna die, but you're not gonna die, and it just eventually you come out of it. It's super scary. It's really brutal. It's not fun.
Doesn't sound it. How long would you say those last, or does it vary based on how serious it is?
It varies. So for panic attacks, I mean, anxiety, like there are stretches where I'll go every morning. I wake up with anxiety and I have an anxiety attack, and I have to like, and I know in my head, like, okay, just get in your routine, get in the car, driving to work, get in the car, put on music or put on a podcast or something, distract you. And then as soon as I start typing on my keyboard at work, goes away.
Is that just because you're doing routine things?
Yeah. And also a huge stressor for me for anxiety is work. It's a huge stressor for me. And so I something that I told the group the other day that I think will resonate with a lot of people who have anxiety is that it feels like there are like 5 record players going on at the same time, or 5 records being played, or 5 songs, whatever you want to take it. And you can't turn them off. Like, that's how your mind operates. Like like some people can have thoughts and go, whatever, I don't care. I'm not going to think about that. When I have thoughts that stress me out, I can't get rid of them, and I obsess over them. So all night long in my head, like, let's say I'm like, oh, I'm going to fire someone tomorrow, and that stresses me out. All night long, I'm going to fire someone tomorrow. Oh my God, how's it going to go? How are they going to react? What are they going to do? I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to like, and that's how it starts. And then it keeps going on and on and on. So then the next day, you know, that's how I'm thinking. And then, you know, anyway, so yeah, work is a big stressor for me. Panic attacks. So panic attacks are interesting because I told you they can happen abruptly. So when JJ was born, it was the most exciting time of my life. I've wanted a child my entire life. That's what I've been looking forward to. And I have June. She's my stepdaughter, and I love her to death. But you know, birthing my own child was something
the process of it, yeah. And to clarify, JJ is your 2-year-old.
JJ is my 2-year-old. For those of you that don't know, so I have June. She's 12, and then I have JJ, my 2-year-old. We got 3rd on the way, Jolene. And so, you know, your wife's pregnant, you're excited, and you go through the motions, and the Red Sox had just won the World Series, which was super exciting.
For some.
But in the background, my family has a lot of drama, as you know, and my mother and father cannot be in the same place. And so throughout this process, instead of just kind of getting to like the birth, you know, there's this like, you have to like make sure my mom's going to visit at a certain time, my dad's going to visit at a certain time, like all this crap that we can't even just look forward to the birth. And then we had a dinner the night before. That didn't go over well. There's some drama there. So all that happened, that stress, so it gets put in the kind of the back of my mind. And I'm also excited. And the recipe of stress and excitement actually is not a good thing. That's actually a very common indicator of when anxiety attacks or panic attacks can happen. So JJ's born. Lack of sleep is not good for anxiety either. Didn't get any sleep that night. We went to the hospital early. And I basically slept on the floor of her room. It's like a small waiting room they keep you in. And then they took her in to have a C-section. JJ's born, excited, happy. They gave me a moment to go be with my son by myself when he was first born in the dark. And then boom, it hit right then.
Like
right
while
there.
You're holding him?
While I'm holding him, looking at him for the first time, connecting with him, bonding with him. The moment I've been waiting for my whole life, I get dropped this awful panic attack, and it winds up continuing. And I wind up having it actually like off and on that whole first day, then the second day, until finally it was gone. but I mean, you were there. I was in the
Yeah.
bathroom, like in and out, and I was so embarrassed. I was so ashamed.
I was going to say, we should add at this point, for those of you who don't know, I am Jake's brother-in-law. I'm married to his sister. So when he refers to personal things,
Despite
it's
my
like,
choices.
yeah, he hasn't like just opened up to me over Facebook. I actually know him intimately. But anyway, yes, I was there. I remember. Yeah, it was really rough for you. I mean, is that, it seems to me, as someone who does not get panic attacks, like this could affect you in every serious moment of your life. Is that like pretty consistent, or are there times where you kind of not had that happen?
No, there are times, and that's like the abruptness of it. Like, you know, there are exciting moments in my life. You know, Jess and I got married. That went well. No panic attacks, nothing. You know, birthdays, huge events. When we do our football broadcasts, like stuff that I'm looking forward to, I'm excited about. It doesn't happen. But then there are times where, you know, your wedding, when you and my sister got married.
You're welcome.
The night before, you gave me a good old panic attack.
Yeah.
And I was super excited, and you know, and so like it just can happen abruptly. Sometimes you can tie it to things. Sometimes it just happens. The other night, 2 weeks ago, just middle of the night, woke up, awful panic attack. Had no idea why. I was not stressed. In my mind, I wasn't stressed. Everything was fine. I just woke up straight into a panic attack, and then for like 6 hours I had it, and then finally it went away. But yeah, when JJ was born, that was brutal, and I felt I felt bad for Jess. I felt awful that I couldn't be there for her, and that makes it worse because in the moment now you start to get super depressed. You know, you have this fear that you're going to die in the back of your mind, and you got this to go on. Not to play, you know, victim card too much here, but like I felt terrible. Everyone, you guys are visiting, my parents are visiting, JJ's sitting out there, and I have to go to the bathroom. Like I can't, if I sit there, I'm going to vomit. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to dry heave in front. So like I have to do that.
Worse, yeah.
And I shouldn't be the one having to go to the bathroom. It should be like Jess, poor thing, having to go, you know, like, and so I remember I just kept coming out of the bathroom and I wasn't throwing up. It was like nothing. I was throwing up like spit, you know what I mean? And like coming out and just being like so embarrassed. And it's brutal to deal with. And so after that had happened, it had been, I think, a year and change when I stopped taking meds. So I hate taking medication. I want to be one of those people. It's very cliche to say this. I want to be one of those people that's not living off of medication. And so I was on Zoloft when I first got diagnosed, and I eventually was able to wean myself off by crossword puzzles. As weird as that sounds, I started doing crossword puzzles every night. And instead of looking at my phone and kind of having my mind race, that really helped. So I was able to wean off. But when the JJ attack happened, and that also then, you know, at your wedding, I kind of started getting them again. So I was like, you know what? I can't mess around. I finally met the love of my life, you know, with Jess. I don't want her to go through what I went through as a spouse with it. And, you know, so I went back to the doctor. Awesome doctor. And they gave me Zoloft again. That didn't work. It made me super dizzy. So then I got Xanax, and they gave me a smaller dose of Xanax. And that helped, but I was able to wean off of it. And now I use Xanax purely for roller coasters.
So that was one of my questions, because you occasionally get these panic attacks. Like, how are you supposed to use Xanax? Is it as needed, or are you supposed to be using it like every day? Or
yeah. It's a good question. Can be as needed. They recommend taking it before bed.
Okay.
Because it helps you kind of sleep. So, like I said, one of the biggest disservices you can do to yourself if you have anxiety is not get sleep. That's like your brain needs to rest. You know what I mean? Like your brain needs to rest, your body needs to rest. Same thing. So the more you don't sleep, the more it's bad for you. So, the Xanax will like put me out for the night, and it's basically like an extreme ZzzQuil. But you can use it, you know, if you feel anxious, or you feel like, you know, you're about to go to do something that could cause anxiety, like you could take it. Sometimes I take 2 versus 1, or 3 versus 1. When we went, so as you guys now know, Vince is my brother. And so we, for Jess's birthday, She loves, huge theme park fan. Jess Schwartz, my wife, for those of you that may not know.
I don't think you have any problems there, by the way.
Yeah, suck it. So we went to a Cedar Point trip for her. So we drove up. It's an awesome road trip, a lot of fun. Vince, my sister, Jess, me, and my brother, then Junebug went to a road trip. And so we went to Kings Island first. And so I had just like started doing roller coasters. Like before that, I like hated roller coasters, couldn't do them, refused to get on like Splash Mountain. I just, no stomach drops. Jess got me over that. She immersed me. I was able to start doing them. So I was like, all right, I'm in the groove. I could do these. This is her birthday trip. I want to be able to do it. We go on the first roller coaster, and I just hit a bad stomach drop, and excitement and stress. And then I don't know if you knew this, Vince, but I got jumped into a mild anxiety attack / panic attack. And that and we went on I think one more ride before we went to go eat lunch. And I couldn't shake it. We went to go eat lunch. I couldn't eat food. And so I went to go meet my friend Steven was flying in to join us. I went to go meet him outside. I went to our bag. I pulled out my Xanax. I took 5 of them.
And then I do remember you going back to the parking lot to grab Xanax. I didn't realize you took 5 of them though.
Yeah, I took 5 of them. Probably shouldn't have taken 5, but I took 5, and I was great the rest of the day. Unfortunately, you didn't. The hot weather didn't do so well for you, but I wound up being okay.
We should add just anecdotally about this trip. My wife, your sister, also gets anxiety. I don't know if they're panic attacks. She hasn't really seen anyone for it, but she definitely gets anxiety. That same trip she had anxiety.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also on top of that, your daughter June did not feel well in the car. And then on top of that, I was undiagnosed by 7 months with a condition called dysautonomia, which one of the triggers is sun or is heat. And we were in Mason, Ohio that first day. At what was it, King's Dominion or whatever?
Kings Island.
Island. And it was 96 degrees in the middle of Ohio.
Brutal.
Yeah, so all of us are just a disaster that first day. But yeah, I remember that you're all hopped up the rest of the day, which good for you. But yeah, we were all a mess that day.
It was rough. So lesson to be learned: if Jess wants you to go on a birthday trip with her to theme parks, don't do it.
Yeah, don't go to Ohio, just in general. It's not worth the pain. You do bring up roller coasters, though, and I've witnessed, because I remember, before you met Jess, obviously we still knew each other, and you were, deathly afraid of roller coasters. Would not go on anything with a drop at all. And I remember this. Melanie and I are huge roller coaster fans, always have been. You just wouldn't go on them with us. Should also add, Melanie works at Universal, so this was a fairly common thing. We live in Orlando, so there's roller coasters every 5 feet. Is that one of your, we've talked a lot about the lows, and I'm sure we'll get back into them, but as far as the highs go, dealing with this every day, overcoming it, is that your crowning achievement, or are there other things too where you're just you know what, that's a real big win for me, dealing with this and still being able to do XYZ? So
one of the separators for anxiety versus panic attacks or panic disorder is fear. So when you get into that fear stage, I mean phobia fear. I don't mean oh, I'm scared of this. I mean I'm shaking. I want to go throw up. I'm going to die fear if I do XYZ, right? Agoraphobia, all that stuff. I believe a crippling one. A crippling. I believe I legitimately had a phobia of roller coasters. As silly as that sounds, I think it was. I told everyone I met in my life, I have 2 fears: ghosts and roller coasters. I'll never watch. I won't watch Casper, and I won't go on Splash Mountain. You're not gonna get me to do either, right? And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I can watch horror movies. I can't watch a ghost pops up into the screen. That's it. Sixth Sense. I didn't know at the time. I was 12. I had panic attacks when I saw Sixth Sense. And so anyways, fast forward till now, to answer your question, I am extremely proud of myself for overcoming that, because, that's something that is, when you have a phobia or it's borderline phobia, you know, it's a seriously, Vince, when we would go to, you know, Universal, I knew I was not going to go on any roller coasters, but I was scared the whole night thinking about you guys asking me to try something. Like that's how bad
Just
it
like
was.
the thought of it.
Yeah, because that's what I mean, you know, like it's a roller coaster. You know what I mean? Like, let's go. It's fun. Come on, Jake. You'll be okay. Just get over the you know, like, and now I could say that. Like, yeah, I agree. Like, I could see why people would say that. I get over it now. But like at the time, I was so deathly scared of stomach drops for some reason. It was ingrained in my head as just like something that was going to kill me that I couldn't get past. So anyways, immersing myself into that and getting over it, despite having to use Xanax. It's, you know, like, and Jess was awesome. She's like, I will never force you to go on a ride. It's right. Her passion. She's like, you do what you want. I won't force you.
I was going to say, we should also add, again, to clarify, Jess has been on how many roller coasters? Like 300?
300 plus. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she's nearing 400 at this point. Yeah.
She is an actual roller coaster enthusiast, like in groups over it and whatnot. To clarify, because we keep kind of mentioning that, like, Jess wants to go on a roller. It's not like some weird, like, she's an actual, that's her passion in life. Jake, entering their relationship, was deathly afraid of them. So that's where the story comes in. How did you do it?
Ben Dirth, who is in some of our life groups, mostly sport ones, baseball, football. And he also was on our former podcast, The Stall Talk.
Yes.
He was visiting. So he lives in Massachusetts. So he and his wife were and their kids were visiting. So we all agreed to go to Mickey's Christmas Spectacular at Disney Magic Kingdom. And so we got there and I was like, Jess, I want to try Space Mountain. And she's like, what? And I'm like, I'm asking you to force me, because by the end of the night, I won't want to do it. And I need you to force me to do it, because I need to see if I can do this, because in the back of my head, even though Jess was so kind and so supportive, and she knew if I wanted to hold purses and popcorn bags for every roller coaster trip we went on, she'd be okay with that. I couldn't do that. Marrying someone like that, who loves this hobby and wants to do it all the time. And it's a passion.
Yeah, that's a tough spot.
And our kids, right? Like June loves roller coasters too. She's been on way more than I have too. She's over, I think, almost 200. And then I'm sure JJ and Jolene will love them too. And so I just knew, like, for our life to be easy, I didn't want to be difficult in it. And so I wanted to try it, and I had my Xanax with me. I was prepared. And so we hung out with Ben and Amy the whole night. Ben actually is deathly afraid of stomach drops too, ironically. So we did all like kiddie rides the whole night, which I still love. But anyways, we got to the end of the night. They wound up leaving. It was like 11:45 at night. Jess is like, all right, you ready to go on Space Mountain? I'm like, nah, not happening. She's like, you said you would go on Space Mountain. And I'm like, let's walk over there. And then I watched on my phone the ride over and over again to like see.
You used to Google the YouTube videos of these rides ahead of time to like prep yourself.
Gringotts.
Mm-hmm.
That has like a little mini like elevator drop. It's like a story or two. I watched that over and over, and like in line, just thinking to myself, okay, it's 1.5 seconds. Okay, 1.5 seconds. That's a half a second 3 times. I can do this. You know, like it's so stupid, but that's how my brain worked. So anyway, so I watched the video. We get in Space Mountain line. Thank God it wasn't that long. We get there and I popped 2 Xannies in and went on it, and I got off and I was like, that was fun. I think I'm good. And then like, I think you and Mel and Jess and I went to Magic Kingdom again, and then we did Splash Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like freaking out. We got like to the hill and I'm like, Jess, can I get out of the ride? Can we get someone? I want to get out of this ride. Please, please, please. And she's like, Jake, you can't. We're in deep in the ride. There's no employees.
Distinctly remember this. Yes.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God. So did Splash Mountain. And this is where I discovered my trick, which is so stupid and embarrassing for Vince, as he is called out.
I've been waiting for this.
If you yell before the stomach drop. You will not feel it. So what I do is when we get to the hill, I just start to, and I start yelling, and we went through it and I didn't feel it. And then anyway, so then after that, we went to Busch Gardens. I did a few rides at Busch Gardens. I was okay. And then we went to Carowinds in North Carolina. I did a few roller coasters there. I was okay. I got better. And I just started making my way up. And then now I can do the 320-foot drops, no problem. And I don't need Xanax anymore. And I still scream a little bit before the drop, though.
Well, I mean, Cedar Point. For those of you who have not been to Cedar Point, that's like the mecca of roller coasters. I mean, I was screaming on the Beast. That thing still scares the shit out of me just thinking back on it, and I love it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I remember we were on Magnum at Cedar Point. That was the one where like you go through a tunnel and it was really cool. And it was raining. It was like pouring rain, and like
Yes.
Justin, and I think Wes, the four of us went on. I don't think Melanie went on this one, but we went on, and I was doing my screaming thing, and you were like, "What the hell are you doing? Like, why do you keep screaming on these rides?"
Yeah, this was not explained to me. I'm like, what is this? Like,
it's a process, Vince. Just enjoy your ride. Don't listen to me. But the best is when I start screaming, and then like there's like a stop before the initial drop. So like I gotta stop screaming because people are like, "Why are you screaming already?"
Yeah,
it's a false start.
Yeah, exactly.
But
so I mean,
taking it back home though. So this was huge for me, and I haven't figured this out at all for anything else, like how to stop panic attacks. There's things you can do, like for people who have anxiety, it's a lot easier to I shouldn't say easier. Your odds of reducing the frequency of anxiety are better if you do things like meditate, take edibles before you go to sleep, chamomile tea, stuff like that. There's all these things that can help your mind just kind of relax and your body get in a peaceful state, which can reduce the potential to let stress affect you to that degree. And so, there's stuff like that, you can do, but like panic attacks are hard. They're abrupt. They're out of nowhere. It's very hard to control. And it's like I said, I'll go. So I've been really good, like knock on wood. I've been really lucky that I've only had a few panic attacks in the last like year. But when they hit, it's not pleasant. So,
what is, you mentioned earlier, obviously you don't want to be around people when you're having them. What's the other protocol? Like, what's the comfort? Are you lying in your bed with the lights off, or like how do you get over that?
So as I told you, like I have a stomach reaction to anxiety. Yeah. So, and a lot of people do. A lot of people get nausea. You feel like a pit in your stomach, but I actually throw up as my way to kind of that how it manifests itself eventually.
Is it gone after that, or
no?
Not to get too into detail about this, but
you kind of like, it's funny because like I know we're getting this kind of gross talking about throwing up, but whatever. I don't care about throwing up. Like Jess reveres throwing up, which sucks when she's pregnant because she gets nauseous and she just, I tell her, just throw up. You'll feel better, baby. Just throw up. Trust me. She's like, hey, she can't do it. And so like for me, if I have to throw up, I'm like, let's do it. Let's get it over with. I'll feel good over it. It's just stomach poisoning, whatever. I'm okay. It doesn't bother me as much because I'm so used to like dry heaving, which is way worse than throwing up and stuff coming out. Right. So anyway, so what I do to, it doesn't feel relief after. Or if I do feel relief, it's like temporary and then it comes back. And then it's kind of like a cycle thing. All right, I'm going to do this 10 more times over 4 or 5 hours, or sometimes an hour. Sometimes it can be short, maybe an hour, or 4 or 5 hours, whatever it winds up being. And then it goes away. I like to curl up under a blanket on cold tile and just lay there. I do like when Jess will like take my hand and rub it. That does comfort me. But talking to me doesn't work. I mean, for some people could. For me, it doesn't work because I can't escape. It's like you're trapped in like a prison in your mind and you just can't escape it. And that's causing physical reactions. And so, For anxiety, there are life triggers that can cause it. So I told you stress, right? It's like work stress can cause it. Traumatic experiences can cause it too. So people can get anxiety later on in their life. It's really unfortunate, but a lot of people who hold in their emotions and don't let them out, don't talk through their feelings, they can develop anxiety over time. Traumatic experiences like losing a loved one, that's a very easy indicator of causing anxiety, especially if you don't cry. So my buddy Steven, who I told you met up with us on the trip, he's had anxiety his whole life. So he was diagnosed with anxiety attacks, and he was on medication for a while too. But he lost his uncle and refused to cry. Like he would not cry. It was like 15, I think. And that, like a week later, boom, started getting anxiety attacks. And then, like it's crazy. And I think depression is a trigger too. I think anxiety can also be part of depression. I feel
like they go hand in hand to a degree.
Yeah, and I know we've had others talk about it, and they've also expressed that they have anxiety too. I'm very fortunate. I don't have depression. I get sad like everyone else, right? But I don't get depression, and that's what's tough. Like I don't ever want to like take away from someone who's like, oh, I have anxiety or I'm feeling anxious. Like everyone feels anxious. Everyone has fear. Everyone worries about stuff, right? Like that's normal. We're human beings. Like you get nervous, right? It happens to you. But if that fear manifests itself, that stress manifests itself into something where you're shaking, convulsing, like feeling nauseous, then you've probably got anxiety, right? But like feeling anxious or worry or a little pit in your stomach, like, it's a sucky feeling, but doesn't necessarily mean you have anxiety. And it's same with depression. Like it's a serious stuff. Like, that's why I tell people, like, mental disorders and stuff that's classified in the DSM-5, like it's serious shit. You can't mess around with it. So like, if you really do believe that you're suffering from depression, you really should seek help. And, I was someone who, this is going to sound weird, but before I went for my initial checkup when I was peeing 20 times a night, I hadn't been to the doctor in like 8 years or something. So I was just like, I don't need to go. Like, I'm not, whatever. Yeah. I'm fine. And so ever since then, I like realized how important it is to go see a doctor, to get checked out. And it's probably cliche to say it, but I also do, to a degree, I do get a little offended when people, say they have something and they don't know if they do, or they claim to be, because I feel like it does take away a little bit from the struggles that I go through. And, it's tough, man. It affects your family, and like I told you earlier, like with JJ's birth, that affected everyone. I had to be selfish when my child was born, like that's brutal. And Jess just went through major abdominal surgery and I can't even be there for her in the way that she needs me to take care of the baby. Like it's just, it's not a game, and it's awful. And, I would just ask that if you know people who have it, like learn about it and don't try to take away from their experiences either, because it's very serious. And that's why like depression, I say like, I'm not even going to touch that one, because chronic depression, manic depression, bipolar, all of those are very serious mental disorders, and it's not something to deal with easily. So,
yeah, you kind of answered one of the questions I had, which was society, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that really inspired me to initiate this mental health awareness month, because we even see it at the government level, right? Like mental illness gets tossed around like, it's ping pong, just to blame, like that's mental illness's fault. That's mental illness's fault. No one ever defines what it is, how to fix it, funding for it. Like none of that ever happens. And then I think our generation in particular, I was just having this conversation with Melanie over dinner, we kind of embrace in a way our mental health. I think if you and I were 40 years older and having this conversation, you would be a lot less open about what your problems are, what your
probably right. It's definitely taboo a while ago.
It's a taboo thing for older generations. For us, I think we almost wear it like a badge, but we're also much more open about this sort of stuff. Societally for you, I think anxiety is one of those things that is very misunderstood. Is there something you wish, and you kind of just answered, I don't know if you had anything else to add, is there something you wish either Hollywood or entertainment or just society in general would get right about anxiety, or maybe stop getting wrong?
A couple things. So, one, I think, we're also a generation of like, let's get out in front of things, let's figure it out. But we're also a generation of like, I want to feel a part of something. I want to
Yes.
belong to something. So like everyone's got depression. I have depression too. Everyone's got anxiety. I have anxiety too. Oh, this must be anxiety, right? Like stuff like that. So I think I wish people would just like, instead of trying to self-diagnose, which I think is very easy to do in today's world, like there's something wrong with me, right? It's got to be something wrong with me, or I want something to be wrong with me.
Right.
I,
Or I
I've been
don't feel
there.
perfect, so
I don't
surely there's something wrong with me.
exactly like I've been there when I was 18. I remember sitting in a hot tub with my friends and they're all going around the circle like these are my family drama issues. And at the time, I didn't know my parents' stuff, but at the time I was like, my life's really good. Like I don't know what I could say right now to
Yeah.
belong in this circle because I'm very fortunate. I grew up in a upper middle class family. I get every video game I want. I'm going to a good school. Like I really didn't have much to like say. So in that moment, I was like, man, I want to have something. I want to make up a story. And I not that people make up things, but I think people will gravitate towards stuff because they want to feel a sense of belonging. They also don't want to like deal with stuff. Right? They want like something to kind of rely on. So from a wish standpoint, I wish people would not rely so heavily on things and not feel like there has to always be an answer of a mental disorder because something's wrong. It's okay to just have things that are wrong in life. It's okay to be sad. We have emotions for a reason, right? We have sad emotions, we have worry, we have anger, we have happiness. Those exist. It's okay to just have those. And I think the older generation got that part of it right. Like just get through your stuff and go through your day.
Yeah. Live and let live.
Yeah, live and let live it. And I agree. Like when I told Jess's dad, I was like freaking out about telling her dad. Like there was one day I had a panic attack. Here's another example. It was Halloween. It's gonna go over. We're gonna do decorations. It's gonna be a great time. In the middle of driving, boom! I get smacked with an awful panic attack. I pull over on the side of the road, start shaking. I'm freaking out. I call her and I'm like, I may not come, honey. I'm sorry. Anyways, I eventually make it over, and I'm like, you know what? I want to tell him. And so I'm freaking out because to your point, like it's probably taboo to be like, I have anxiety. Like, what, you little pansy?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
exactly.
you have anxiety? Come on.
Yeah.
And so today's world, we have FMLA and things where like you could tell your company, your employer, and you get days off of work so that if you get a panic attack, you get a migraine, you have a bout with depression, you can stay home if you need to. Which I don't like to do. I like to push forward and still try to live. And I think people should try to do as much as they can to do that too. My wife will attest to that like I'll have anxiety attacks and I will force myself to go to work and figure it out. Not saying everyone can, but the other thing that I wish Hollywood would get right is to get what it's like to have a panic attack, right? Or an anxiety attack. I think This Is Us, if you watch that show, This Is Us, Randall suffers from anxiety attacks. And they showed a scene where he had one and Kevin left. He had like a Broadway play. He left his own debut of his play to go be with his brother. And Randall like personified exactly, if you could see it physically, because it's in your mind, it's on the inside. If you could see it physically, Randall was like perfect to me. Like
Yeah.
he sat there sitting down, staring forward, and you could see the sweat. You could see kind of the tremoring. And you knew inside he was in turmoil. And that to me is like a very good representation.
It's not like a breathing into a bag necessarily like that. That's
right. There's exaggerated,
it's more
like,
serious than that sometimes.
Yeah. Hank from Breaking Bad did a really good job too. I think his at times were a little exaggerated, but he did a really good job. Like he was in an elevator and all of a sudden his were like panic attacks. He's in an elevator. He's freaking out. He's breathing heavily. He's like gripping onto things. He can't even control himself. Like, and then he's out of it, like not going back to work. I'm out of it. So they've gotten it right. I think Hollywood's gotten it right a couple of times. And then there's other movies I haven't seen. I think like Silver Linings Playbook, I heard, is like a good one that showcases mental disorders very well. But yeah, I think anxiety is one of those. It's like ADHD. It's like one of those newer things in the last 20 years that are finally getting brought out into the limelight. I really wish funding would come back. They've really they've really defunded a lot of organizations to help sick kids, and that breaks my heart. They used to, I think prior to like the 90s, they had a lot of like homes for kids that struggled with mental disorders, and a lot of beds. It's 600,000 beds. Now it's like 60,000. Like Congress defunded that, and it's bad. Like and you could, there's a lot of good documentaries on this stuff that you can watch. But I really wish that they would put funding on it, 'cause I think, like physical stuff, not to take away from anyone physical stuff, right? But there sometimes can be like a remedy. I broke my arm, I get a cast, right? And if I fix it, but like physical diseases or mental diseases, those aren't necessarily like curable or fixable all the time. I mean, like what you deal with, like, yeah, you can do things, you could drink water, but like the sun could hit you the wrong way, Vince, and you're knocked out. Right. And like, that is intense stuff. That's different. And, people need to treat that seriously, and people need to treat mental disorders seriously. And like, when I hear, our group talk about in that chat, like it crushes me to hear people deal with like depression like this. And that's where it's like, can you imagine not having somewhere to go to get that checked out? Or if you need to go live in a home to deal with it,
or being told by your support system, it's not necessary to go get checked out.
Yeah.
You don't need to go to a therapist. There's nothing wrong with you, even though every day you're feeling something wrong. And these are invisible things like you touched on. Like, I wouldn't know from you walking down the street, you're prone to getting a panic attack at any given time. That's part of the challenge.
It is. Yeah. It's crazy too. Like when I tell people like, oh yeah, I get panic attacks. They're like, you do? I'm like, yeah, I mean, unless you've been around when I've had one, I guess you'd never know. But it happens. Like I told a coworker at work one time, I was like, you don't even know, but like the last month, every morning I've woken up with anxiety, and I've still come into work every day. You don't know what that's like to have to do that.
Yeah.
Like, but the thing that if I were to like anything about this, is that with anxiety, at least, I know there are a certain stage I'm going to get to where it's going to be okay. So like, that probably helps me a little bit, where I'm like, I know as soon as I start typing on my laptop at work, it's going to start to dissipate.
So that's one of my questions is, what would your advice be to someone who maybe isn't as far advanced as you in figuring out how to cope with it? Like what would your advice be to someone who maybe is just starting out or isn't sure if they have it, they haven't been diagnosed yet, but they are trying to figure out ways to deal with it better?
Well, I do lean on what I said earlier. Go see your primary care physician, because they can especially for anxiety, they can at least kind of process by elimination.
Yeah, I was going to say, how does that process work? They just ask you questions and then refer you?
Yeah, they take your blood pressure, they do all the blood work, they do all that stuff, and then go, and they can like typically figure out things along those lines and then refer you, and then you go get checked out, get diagnosed. Great. You don't get diagnosed, also great. Like, hey, you don't have it. Awesome. But I would say go try to get checked out first before you do anything, because there are severe cases where you unfortunately need medication, where you need something to cope with it. You can't always find that, like, I meditate and it goes away, or I take an edible before bed every night and it goes away. Or, I mean, you could do a ton of research online, but be very careful, because you don't want to like start doing something and it's not good for you. Or sometimes it can have the opposite effect. So, I knew someone who smoked a lot of marijuana, and, when he had anxiety, and when he would like, smoke it, depending on the type of marijuana, it would either calm him down or it would make it worse.
Yeah.
And he would have a worse bout of it. So like, you do have to be careful to a degree on what you try on your own, not getting diagnosed, because your doctor can say, hey, from what you're sounding like, we're going to give you, 25.25 milligrams, start out on this. We're going to get you up to levels, see what you can take, and then we'll wean you off of it. But they have, meditation, yoga, all that stuff, it helps. It's good. There's a lot of things you can do it's your mind. It's your mind and your emotions. And so the more you can take this pressure off of your brain, the better. And so that's what I would recommend. I went to a therapist in Massachusetts just for stress, because I was like, I get stressed out way too much about work. Little did I know at the time that would eventually lead to this, or be part of it. And it gave me the therapist gave me these audio CDs to listen to. And this guy just like had a super relaxing voice, but he talked a lot about like, sometimes you have all of these thoughts like popping in your head like popcorn. And all it takes is just one popcorn to push you over the edge into this either stressful state or this like anxious state, or this rage state. And that's all it takes, because you're compounding these thoughts and you're just taking them all in and you're just like putting them in there. Sometimes it's best actually to let the thought happen and just let it pass, instead of trying to block it and say, I don't want to think that. I don't want to worry about this. I don't want to stress about this. That can actually be more damaging. And it's better sometimes to just say, you know what? Just like Jack Shepherd from Lost, I'm going to give this thought 5 seconds and that's all it's going to get. And then I'm moving on. Like sometimes it's good to do that. So I would recommend doing some research, talking to some friends who have it, getting some advice from them. But number one, I would absolutely try and go to your primary care physician and mention what you're dealing with, and see if they can process of eliminate to help out and figure out why it is, and see if there's actually something physical happening that's not related at all. Could be too, or refer you. And that's how you can get diagnosed and then know your path forward from there. But
awesome. All right. Well, hey, really good conversation. Thank you for opening up to us. Thank you for volunteering for this. I think it's a very universal topic, so it could potentially help a lot of people. And we will have this posted. Anyone who wants to contribute or has further follow-up questions for Jake, you can ask it obviously in the thread that this interview takes place in, and he'll be there to answer questions the entire next day as well. So thank you again, Jake, for the conversation, and have a good night.
Yeah, man. Thanks for talking to me.